up early again. Not because you're rested. No, it's because sleep doesn't feel like rest anymore. You roll out of bed before the alarm even buzzes, and you stare at that screen, not because there's anything urgent, but because you don't know what else to do. There's a part of your life that moves: meetings, messages, errands, click, swipe, done. But there's another part that just watches, suspended, half-lit, like it's waiting for something it can't even name. You tell yourself you're making progress, building something, maybe. But then, right under the static of notifications and headlines, you catch it. That flicker, that weird little feeling you can't put into words. That ain't momentum. That's drift. And it doesn't feel tragic, just off, like some tiny misalignment you can't quite fix. So what do? You ignore it. You keep moving. You go through the motions. Smile, answer, laugh when you're supposed to. But inside, something's cooling, not broken, just disconnected. And this is the part you never say out loud, because it sounds dramatic, ungrateful, maybe even arrogant. Who are you to question the structure? Everyone else seems just fine, living in. But it comes back, in the shower, in traffic, in that split second before the Zoom call starts. And here's why: you see too much. Not in some mystical guru kind of way, but in the painfully ordinary one. You notice the loops, the patterns, the way people move like they're on rails, chasing goals they never picked, playing roles they didn't choose, speaking lines that don't quite fit. And when you try to forget it, bury it under ambition, or love, or some new thrill, it fades for a while, but only for a while. Then it comes back, flickers on like a warning light. Not because you're better, not because you're smarter, but because you're more awake than you want to be. And that's where Schopenhauer steps in. He didn't see humans as noble thinkers or rational heroes in some grand play. He saw them as vessels, carriers of the will, a blind, relentless force that drives everything: to want, to chase, to consume. No aim, no logic, no finish line, just motion, just hunger, that never ever ends. And consciousness, that wasn't some divine gift. It was a side effect, a glitch. The will, in becoming aware of itself, accidentally created suffering. Because now, some creatures, you among them, can see the futility of it all. You don't suffer because you're weak. You suffer because you can't stop noticing. You see the hollowness behind the grind, the repetition beneath the noise. You see how meaning is manufactured and how fast it fades. You watch people chase things, not because they want them, but because they need something, anything to fill the silence. This isn't depression. This isn't apathy. This is clarity. And clarity comes with a cost. Because once you see the machine for what it really is, you can't pretend it's a dream anymore. You can't play the game. You realize you're not drifting because something's wrong with you. You're drifting because the engine itself was built to move without direction. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. There's a kind of pain that doesn't scream. It doesn't break you in one loud moment. It just builds quietly, like light bleeding into an overexposed lens. Too much clarity, not enough shelter. That's the pain of seeing too much. Not the big, dramatic, cosmic truths, but the slow, steady unraveling of everyday illusions. You notice how people speak in preloaded phrases. You hear the echo in their jokes. You spot the copy-paste emotions at weddings, at promotions, even at funerals. You start pulling away. Not because you're better, not because you don't care, but because you're just exhausted. It's hard to stay immersed in the play once you've seen the scaffolding holding up the stage. The trick of belief, it only works when you're not looking straight at it. This is what Schopenhauer meant when he said suffering deepens with consciousness. The intellect, it wasn't salvation, it was exposure. It lets you step back from the will, but stepping back, that doesn't set you free. It just makes you aware you're trapped. A cow suffers from pain, but a person suffers from meaninglessness. Because we ask why, and we get no answer. And the sharper your awareness gets, the more the world around you starts to look like theater. Passion starts to look like repetition. Purpose feels like it's wearing a disguise. Even joy, feels borrowed. And the good days, they come with static in the background, that faint, flickering knowing that it doesn't hold. And you start to understand the cost of seeing clearly isn't madness, it's disconnection. You're not in the play anymore. You're in the audience, watching a show that doesn't even know it's being watched. And no matter how vivid the scene gets, no matter how loud the music swells, you can't pretend to be the character again. Most people, they think they know what they want. A better job, a partner, some peace, a little recognition. They believe their desires are theirs, that they chose them, that they mean something. But Schopenhauer, he saw the shadow behind it. You don't choose to want. You wake up already wanting, and no matter how much you feed that hunger, it doesn't go away. It just changes shape. You were never the driver. You were the engine, built to burn. Schopenhauer called it the will, a blind, relentless force that pulses through everything. It doesn't think, it doesn't care, it doesn't stop. It just wants, through you, around you, into everything. You're not the author of your desire. You're just its vessel. Think about it. Why do you feel restless, even after success? Why does love feel so full, then fall into need? Why do you reach for your phone, again and again, without even knowing what you're searching for? That's the will. It doesn't care what you achieve. It only cares that you keep reaching, because the moment it's satisfied, even for a second, it collapses into boredom. And boredom, that's intolerable. So what does it do? It invents new cravings, new goals, new problems to fix. You're not living, you're just perpetuating. And intelligence, or more accurately, awareness, it makes the whole cycle visible. You begin to notice it. Fulfillment, followed by numbness. Anticipation, followed by disappointment. The same loop. New mask. People call this growth. Schopenhauer called it torment. Because when you finally realize that the steering wheel's not even connected to the wheels, that you're being moved by something you can't control, you don't feel powerful. You don't feel enlightened. You feel hollow, like a puppet, watching its own strings. And the most painful part, the strings don't even lead anywhere. The world, it offers you exits. Or at least, it pretends to work. Romance, family, spirituality, productivity. Each one whispers the same lie. This will quiet the hunger. This will last. So you chase them. Because really, what else is there? You dive headfirst into a career. You fall in love. You build, you plan, you create. And for a while, it works. The noise dulls. The drift, it feels like movement again. But then, something cracks. You get the promotion and feel nothing. You fall in love, but under all that warmth, you still feel alone. You finish the project, but the high dissolves in a matter of hours. And you start to wonder, was the thing broken or was I? But Schopenhauer, he'd say something darker. The thing was never real. The will just shape-shifted again. It dressed itself up as work, as love, as purpose, just to keep you reaching. It turned work into identity, turned love into longing, turned spirituality into spectacle. Each one became a loop, a script, a performance. And once you see the structure, you can't unsee it. You can't walk back into the illusion blindly. Think about it. Work never ends. There's always a next level. Love never completes. It loops between passion and fear. Pleasure, gone the moment it touches your skin. Even peace, becomes just another thing to chase. And when that hits you, not just in your thoughts, but in your gut, the sacred forms start to lose their shape. The stage set wobbles, the lights flicker, the applause sounds recorded. You're not cynical, you're not jaded, you're lucid. You're seeing the cracks that were always there. Only now, the paint can't cover them. And the worst part, you're still playing along, still showing up, still nodding, smiling, doing, not because you believe, but because there's no true exit. Only different illusions to collapse into, and some collapse a little more quietly than others. To see clearly is not a blessing, it's a wound. They call it pessimism, because it's easier to label than to look, easier to dismiss than to face it. They think, if you see the world as bleak, there must be something wrong with you. But what if it's not pessimism at all? What if it's just accuracy? Schopenhauer never glamorized this kind of vision. He knew to truly see, to live outside the soft fog of distraction, was to carry a quiet kind of horror. Not the horror of tragedy or disaster, but something slower, something permanent. The ache of recognizing the pattern behind everything. You start to notice how love mimics addiction, how ambition mimics hunger, how progress is just motion in disguise. It's like standing in a room lit by a harsh, white light. No shadows, nowhere to hide, no mystery, no softness, just clear edges, exposed structure, bare walls, and in that blinding clarity, you realize something terrifying. You're alone, in a way that no connection can ever fix. Not because others don't care, but because they don't see. They still live inside the game. But you've seen the wires. They believe the next milestone will bring relief. You already know it won't. And that knowing, that sharp, unbearable knowing, isolates you more deeply than any physical distance ever could. That's the curse of vision. You see what others can't, but it costs you the ability to belong. Even when you try to reconnect, to feel, to believe again, it feels fake. You smile when you're supposed to, say the right words, nod in all the right places. But your eyes, they're somewhere else. Not out of pride, not out of arrogance, but because you've lost your place in the shared dream. And once you've woken up, you can't go back to sleep. You're surrounded by abundance, but still starving. Music, beauty, connection, pleasure, it's all there, and still something inside stays unsatisfied. Not craving more, craving something else, something you can't even name. This isn't material hunger. It's not about lack. It's about the failure of everything to feel like enough. Schopenhauer knew. He understood this fracture. To him, consciousness wasn't progress. It was a defect, a cruel mistake in the machinery of evolution, a trick the will played on itself. Because now, the organism doesn't just want, it knows that it wants. And worse, it knows that nothing will ever truly satisfy. That wanting, the animal eats and rests. The human eats and asks, why do I still feel empty? That is the split. The will still drives forward, but now it's chained to a mind that sees the loop. And the loop doesn't stop just because you see it. If anything, the awareness makes it even more unbearable. So you keep trying. You date, you travel, you create, you reflect, and still, that strange, quiet emptiness, it lingers, like you're broadcasting a signal into some higher frequency, one meant for something beyond this world, but there's no response, no echo, no receiver on the other side. So the feeling shifts from isolation to a deeper kind of disconnection from the structure of meaning itself. Even when life's going well, even when it's good, the core of you remains untouched. Like whatever the soul is, if it exists at all, it's seated too deep to be reached by anything this world offers. And the more conscious you become, the more sharply you feel that starvation. You don't want more, you want out. But there's no out only awareness, and the slow, echoing realization that awareness cannot be fed. In the beginning, it felt like movement, like there was a direction. You told yourself, this is purpose, this is growth, this is life. But now, the illusion has worn thin. What once looked like momentum now feels like a system failure in slow motion. The lights still blink, the buttons still respond, but the machine, it's lost its direction. You're still doing everything, answering emails, making plans, laughing at texts. But inside, somewhere in the engine, it's gone quiet, not broken, just stripped of destination. And now, when people talk about purpose, it sounds like fiction. When they celebrate wins, it sounds pre-recorded. When they say, everything happens for a reason, it hits like static, because you've seen what's underneath. The will thrashing blindly through everything, dragging you forward with promises it never keeps. Love, career, art, all of it. Just carefully designed containers for a hunger that has no name, and intelligence, awareness, that was never a gift. It was a glitch in the system, a mirror held up to machinery that was never meant to be watched. Just one brief, terrible moment when the puppet becomes aware of its strings, and worse, becomes aware of the empty ceiling they're tied to. You try to go back, try to forget, try to reintegrate, try to slip back into the old rhythm, but the lights are on now, and once you've seen the wires, the show just doesn't work anymore. So you drift, not because you're lost, but because there was nowhere to go in the first place. You've become like the machine that knows it's a machine, still running, still responding, but with no belief left in the system. And no loss of belief hits harder than this.